up, everybody? It's Matt from Music Producer School. Hope you're doing well. Today, we're going to be covering the third part of our mixing series this week. And I wanted to just remind you, and I'll mention it again in just a little bit, that if you have not joined the Music Producer School community, be sure to do so, because when I'm finished with today's lesson, I'm going to be heading over to the Music Producer School community page, and only there, and I will be letting you submit your tracks, and I'll be listening to them live while I'm streaming, and I'm going to give some feedback on your tracks, seeing if we can maybe improve them a little bit, or maybe they're just really killer tracks already, and we don't have to worry about doing any improvements. But usually there's always something that can be improved. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to put the link to the Music Producer School community page. I'm gonna put them in the Facebook comments right now. So if you haven't joined the Music Producer School community, please click that link and go and join it, and I will approve you just as soon as I can make it over there. And like I said, once we're finished with class today, I'm going to head over there and I'll be listening to your tracks. So if you want to submit a track, be sure that you go and sign up for that. So let me quickly here get the comment in there with the link, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, today we're going to finish up our mixing lessons, and of course, as I've stated before, what I'm doing, since we're just kind of cranking this thing up, is I'm going over just the basic stuff at first. There's the link for Music Producer School community. So I'm going over the basics first, just because I wanted to start from the beginning for everybody, just in case you're not very experienced. Music production, there's just so many things to think about and to learn. It's just, you've probably heard this before, but it really is just a journey that you're always going to be learning and learning. I've been doing it professionally for like 15 years now, and I'm still learning stuff all the time. And not only music producing or production, but all the things that come along with it. And that's also what I want to cover with Music Producer School. It's not going to be just making beats. It's going to be teaching you how to go. Ideally, what my goal as a producer always was this. I wanted to be able to go into the studio with any artist at any time, working on any genre of music, and I wanted to be able to be not just passable good, I want it to be great at every one of those. And that's obviously hard to do, because think about how many genres of music there are. But at this stage, I am in a place where I feel pretty comfortable getting into the studio with just about anyone, and they could pretty much throw any genre of music at me, and I would feel pretty comfortable producing that genre. And mostly it's because of what I've been saying over and over again, which is I'm trying to teach you guys and girls problem solving skills. That's really what production is. It's solving problems all the time. And you have to learn how to break things down and solve problems, not just saying, oh, I know what preset that is, for a synth sound. You have to understand, how is that synthesizer functioning in the song? And that's what I think of all the instruments or the parts of a song. I always think about, what is their function? Meaning, you may have a vocal line that's actually functioning more like a rhythmic element. It's almost functioning like a hi-hat. You may have, sounds that are not snare drums that are hitting on the 2 and the 4 that kind of function as snare drums. So there's all these different things to cover, and like I said, I'm just keeping it basic here at first, because I wanted to get everybody kind of from the ground floor up, and we're just going to keep adding and layering more and more skills. So anyway, today what I wanted to focus on was mixing. So I'm going to go over into FL Studio today. I know we have a lot of FL Studio users out there, so I'm going to try and start hitting a little bit more FL Studio whenever possible. Basically, what I wanted to talk about with you guys today was probably one of the most important concepts when it comes to mixing out of everything. And I wish I would have learned this concept just way, way earlier because it just didn't really register for me at the beginning of my career. And man, if it would have, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble. So, this concept is called distortion. Now, most of you have probably heard of distortion before, and you think maybe of like a guitar amplifier distortion, or else you think of distortion in a bad way, meaning your track is overloading. But what I wanted to give you kind of a little preview today was distortion is going to be one of your best friends when it comes to mixing. And if you haven't gotten this deep into mixing yet, I would encourage you, I'm going to try and introduce the concept today, but I would encourage you to start listening for this when you start listening to music. And another thing is I don't typically advocate listening when you're mixing on headphones. They are a good resource to use because it's a different perspective when you're mixing. Your environment is a little bit more controlled on headphones, so they are okay to use. And especially if that's all you can use, I mean, it's you got to do what you got to do. But when I'm mixing, typically I have two sets of speakers that I am always listening on. I do have my headphones that I listen to quite often, and then I also will, like I mentioned in a previous lesson, I'll make mixes and I'll print them to an MP3 and I'll put them on my phone and I'll listen to it literally on the phone speaker because a lot of people listen that way now. I'll also bring the phone so I can go listen to it in the car. And I also have a couple smaller speakers that are like battery kind of powered things that I can Bluetooth an MP3 into, and I can listen on these very tiny speakers and see, can I still hear the kick drum? Can I still hear the vocal? Is something too loud? Is something too soft? Did the bass disappear? Because I'm on a small little speaker now. And I'll kind of just jump in right there with our topic that I wanted to cover today with mixing, which is distortion. Especially for bass lines where, let's say, you're not hearing it come through on your iPhone. Let's say you're not hearing it come through on the smaller speakers. Distortion, distortion, distortion is going to be your best friend when it comes to that. Because the fact is, what happens with distortion is if you have your regular, just say like a very kind of sine wave type bass tone, there's not really a lot of information if that's just say like a 50 to 80 hertz sine wave. So what you can do, and we'll get into all these topics a little bit deeper, but one quick tip for your basses is you can actually layer a bass line that's the same exact bass line, but pitch it up by an octave. And then like I was showing you in the last lesson with EQ, take a lot of that bass information out, because the thing is, on your iPhone or your Android phones, the speakers can't produce 80 hertz and below, not to any really audible range. So what you need to do is make sure you're filling the frequencies in that they can reproduce. So if you really need to hear what that bass line is doing, copy the bass line, pitch it up one octave, maybe sometimes even two octaves, and cut out all the extra low information that you don't need on that line anyway. Now this is on the copied second bass line. Cut out that low end information and then put a little distortion on it so that you don't have to jack up the volume of the whole bass line. You can actually just distort certain frequencies in the bass line. So that way, when you distort it, that's going to actually help it poke through on these smaller speaker systems. And again, this is a topic I'm probably going to dedicate like a whole week just to this topic alone because it gets so in depth and complex. But it's definitely something you want to start thinking about right now. Distortion is your best friend. And I'm talking just little amounts of distortion, not like crazy guitar heavy distortion, but just little amounts mixed in here and there along the way when you're building your track up. This is also going to help with loudness for your tracks, because everybody wants their tracks to be super loud these days. So you can't just slap on a limiter at the end of your track and just jack it up and expect it to be cool. Because what's going to happen is you're going to hear the limiter or your compressors pumping, and it's actually going to take power away from your track. So you need to start learning how to apply these little bits of distortion every step of the way, and just a little bit at a time. So by the time it gets to your master channel, that way everything's kind of as loud as it needs to be. Now, even on the master channel, typically I like to put a little bit of some type of like a tape saturation plug-in. Let me see if I can pull up an FL here on my master channel. If I can pull up my my UAD stuff, because I really do like the UAD tape saturation plugin, which again, it's not a super audible thing, which that's what makes it difficult, because you can't really hear it super easy at especially at first when you start messing with this type of stuff. So let me see, I believe this is the one right here. So something like this, where you have a tape machine and it's just this little bit of distortion that it's actually putting, which sometimes people will call saturation. So either distortion or saturation plugins are what you're looking for, and just a little bit of that can actually help smooth out your mix a little bit. Because again, when we're working in a digital workstation like FL Studio or Pro Tools or Ableton, what tends to happen is the sounds are so clean and they're so high in the high frequencies. By the time you get to the end of your mix and you've compressed and you've EQ'd and you've limited everything, what happens is those high frequencies build up and they will start to actually pierce your ears. So if you ever listen to professionally done mixes, you'll notice that the top end, it's bright typically, but it's kind of what I would call smooth on the top end. It just kind of slowly rolls off and it's not piercing to your ears. So that's a combination of a bunch of things. But again, this idea of distortion and saturation are just going to be adding these little bit of nice kind of roll-offs on the high end that are going to smooth it out for the listener. So that way when they have their AirPods in and they're listening to your track, it's not going to kill their ears. Hey, what's up, Kane? Yeah, actually, I typically am more of an Ableton and a Pro Tools guy, but I've been getting a lot of people on here requesting that I do some more FL Studio stuff. So I'm going to try and keep varying it, you know, here and there as far as what I'm using. That's another kind of main concept that I guess I could share with you guys, which is, you know, it really doesn't matter at this stage which workstation or DAW you're using. All of them basically do the same thing. It's just more about knowing what you're doing when it comes to this stuff. So let me show you guys a couple quick examples. I got this kick drum going up here. Or let's do a snare. So I got this snare drum going, and what I wanted to show you is, let's say you get to the end of your track and you listen to it in the car, and you're like, man, everything sounds good. I've got it mastered, you know, limited. The volume's good, but the snare just sounds kind of weak. Like it's not, you know, we all know the snare typically is going to should be kind of poking through your track and driving the track forward, right? So let's say your snare isn't quite, you know, powerful enough. Well, of course, one thing you can always do is you can always adjust your volume on the fader in the mix, right? But let's say that you got everything pretty much maxed out and it's not really doing the trick. Well, again, what I would do typically is I'll go, and I wanted to kind of just give you guys a preview of some of the distortion plugins that I like to use so that you can start getting some ideas for yourself. Because another key when it comes to distortion and saturation, and this is also something that's going to give you what we call separation in a mix. If you've ever listened to a professionally done mix, you're going to notice that the instruments seem to kind of have their own little space. And I wish I would have learned this earlier on in my career, but a big key to that, it's not just EQ. if you use different distortion and saturation plugins, especially on the main elements of your mix, like your kick, your snare, your vocals, the stuff that you really want to occupy its own space in the mix, you've got to use distortion and saturation. It's just super, super hard to get that separation without them. And like I said, I spent many a night EQing stuff, just not having any luck getting that nice separation of sounds that you hear in these, top level professionally done mixes. So let me show y'all some of the plugins that I like to use. There are some built-in things with FL. Let me go over those first really quickly. So you have the distortion here. You have the fast distortion, the soft clipper, the wave shaper, the squeeze, and the hardcore. So let's pull up the squeeze, for example. So I'm putting on this square type of distortion, giving it some impact. Now, another thing that you need to watch for is when you're using these plugins, when I have the plugin engaged, I'm actually getting less volume. So you have to be careful with your gains in these plugins. And then here I also have a mix built into the plugin. So again, like I said with compressors, if you're kind of new to this game and you're not really sure what you're listening for, one of the best things you can do is try to push the plugin beyond what you think it should be, so where it's getting kind of crazy. Like that's kind of crazy to me. But then back off the mix and then just slowly start mixing it in. Now, one thing to understand with this particular one, the Fruity Squeeze, this is more of, I would think of it like more of like an effect plugin where I'm actually changing the sound. I'm not so much mixing the sound. So you want to be careful of that as well. So let me show you a couple other of the plugins that I like to use. And let me show you also one more in the FL realm here. See, so this one has a ton of distortion on it. Now also in FL Studio, you have a mix knob over here as well, which I like because you can do a wet dry on any plugin that you want. So this is pretty convenient because here's my regular sound, and then here's my mix coming in. And you can hear it getting a little bit more abrupt there. So again, I really like this mix knob because what you want to do typically is mix it to where, like I said, really crank the plugin so you can hear kind of what it's about and what it's doing to the sound, and then bring the mix back and then just slowly dial the mix back in. Now, another key when it comes to distortion and mixing is you can solo instruments like I'm doing just to get a sense of, okay, this is how the fast distortion works, or some of the other ones that I'm about to show you. But really what you need to do is listen to it, what it's doing in the context of the mix. Because in other words, if you're doing it just soloed, it may sound great, it may sound not great, but it doesn't really matter until you put it in the mix, and then you can hear what it's doing. So it might not really sound like it's doing anything when you're hitting it like this, but then when you play it with the mix, you might be able to hear, oh, now I can hear that snare drum really cutting through. Same thing with like a vocal. So let me show you guys some of the other ones that I like to use that are not just FL Studio plugins, because I know we got people out there that are using Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic, and I just wanted to show y'all some of the third-party ones that I like to use. Just so you could start maybe looking at some of these and seeing which ones you might like to try out. Most of these have free demos and whatnot that you can try out as well. And I'm not affiliated with any of these companies, so I just think that they're cool. So Camel Crusher, this is a cool one. Again, it's super cool because it has this built-in mix knob. So I might just mix in just maybe something like about that much, you know. And then another thing that's cool is it has this filter on here. So let me turn up my tube distortion a little. So you can see again, I'm hitting my note at the same velocity, but when I turn the effect off, I'm getting more volume, watch. So you always want to be sure to check and make sure you're getting your volume back to where it was before. Try to listen to it and look at your meters when you're mixing like this. Look at your meters and see if you're getting the same amount of volume when you're listening to the sound to compare with and without distortion. So this is without, and now with. Yeah, now we're getting a little more punch. So you want to be sure to check that. Now again, this volume is going to be dependent on how much of the distortion you're mixing in. So the more distortion I mix in, the less volume I'm going to need. But again, I'll always go back and forth and I'll cut the plug-in on and off. See, like right there, that's an interesting point right there. I'm getting less volume on the meter. That's without. This is with. I'm getting less volume on the meter, but audibly, it sounds to me like the sound actually got louder. And that's actually, again, that's part of the trick when you're trying to get... What's up, Quake? Thanks for joining. So that's actually one of these tricks that it's called a psychoacoustic trick. So what happens is, even though the meter is showing that the volume is less, when I throw that distortion on and I do it in the right amount, my ear actually hears the sound as being louder. So guess what? When we can get a sound louder to our ears, but lower on the meter, guess what's going to happen when it reaches the master output on our final mix? The compressor on the master is not going to have to work as hard. The limiter is not going to have to work as hard. So we're actually going to be able to get more volume out of our track if we can achieve that. So that's a super important point that I want to emphasize, which is if you can add these little bits of distortion and get more volume psychoacoustically, meaning what you're hearing sounds like more volume. It's actually called perceived volume. So if you can hear more volume and it sounds like it's louder, but on the meter it's actually less, that's a good place to be. Now you can't just do that on every track, because otherwise at the end it'll start sounding distorted. But especially, like I said, for something like a snare drum that you need to cut through, that's a very, very important point. Now, another trick that I like to do is I will actually sometimes, like, so for this sound, for example, on this snare drum, I'm getting more loudness, but I feel like I might be losing a little bit of the punch in the snare when I put that Camel Crusher on there. So another trick that you can do, and this is kind of what I was talking about with the bass earlier, you can actually copy that track. So I would copy the snare drum. I would only put the distortion on the snare drum copy, and I would actually filter out, say like around 500 hertz and below. I would filter that out of the track, because that's where a lot of the punch of a snare drum lives. It's kind of in that like 250 to 300 hertz range. So I'm going to filter all that out on the copy, and I'm only going to distort the copy so that I get that perceived volume bump in the copy, but then I'm going to retain the punch of the original snare drum. So you might even go so far as to, on the copied track, do your Camel Crusher, and then you'll see here there actually is a filter here, but I like to typically filter stuff with my own EQ, so that way I can have a little bit more control as far as what's going on. So on the copy, I may filter out everything below, say, about 500 hertz. So I'm getting that nice distortion on the mid to high range. And then if I had to, on my original sound, I may actually then, without the Camel Crusher, I may actually filter out a good bit of the high end so those frequencies don't overlap. So that would be kind of my punch, and then the other one would be my distorted snare that's going to give me some more of that volume. So let me pop this off. So the Camel Crusher, I believe is actually free plugin. So if you can find it online, I'm pretty sure that was a free one, and that's a super great one. Hey there, sorry about that. So the power decided to go out over at the studio here. So I think we're back live. Sorry for the interruption. Hopefully we can make it through the rest of this without any more power failures. So what I was talking about, again, if you're just rejoining, I was talking about this idea with distortion. And again, the ability to mix just a little bit of it every so often into the master output is really going to help, like I said, boost the level of your tracks, and it's going to really help with separation. So I was just wanting to show you guys just a couple more of the plugins that I like to use for this. So Camel Crusher we just looked at. Another one that I like to use, I have this one called Driver. By Native Instruments. This is another one that I really like. And this one's a little bit more subtle, but I do like, again, having the option to do more subtle distortions and then having the ones where it's really going to just distort the crap out of your stuff, you know? Now that's another interesting thing right there. Some of these distortion plugins are going to actually allow you to do some crazy effects with your stuff. So I've got this envelope on right here. So I'm able to actually distort certain types of frequencies with this. So that's pretty cool. So again, you have the option of kind of going super crazy with this stuff. And again, I would think of that as more of like a sound design type of use right there. Let me show y'all a couple more, and then once again, if you're just joining us, be sure to join the Music Producer School community. I'm going to head on over there right after class today, and I'm going to let you guys submit your tracks right there, either via a YouTube link or a SoundCloud link, something like that. I'm going to listen to it live in the producer community page and give you some feedback on your track. So if you want to participate, we had a lot of fun last Saturday doing it. So be sure to go there. So this one right here, Decapitator by Sound Toys. I really, really love this plugin, and I use it probably on just about every mix. It has a drive control here. Can get super dirty. You have a punish button here where you can really just distort the crap out of stuff. It has these different types of distortion here that you can use. And then again, it has this wet, dry mix knob. So again, I'll usually go kind of crazy, and then I'll mix it in to see what the sound is doing. See, like something like that even would work pretty well for me, I think. And it's I know it's hard in the beginning to really understand what this distortion is doing, but I promise you, just keep playing with it, keep going a little too far with the knob and then dialing it back, because once you start listening for it, you'll be able to pull up tracks that you never even thought about that they were using distortion before, and you're going to start hearing it in tracks that you listen to. Now, especially if you're doing like research and you're trying to hear this and learn how it's being used, I would definitely recommend using some headphones to listen to some of your favorite artist tracks, and you're going to start hearing not just the obvious distortion, like I said, on a guitar or a synthesizer, but you're going to start hearing how these artists and these mixers and producers are using distortion on things like vocals. They're distorting like the mid-range frequencies of the bass line so that you can hear it come through. The drums you're going to hear distortion on. And again, some of it is to create separation. Some of it is to create more volume or level in the track. And some of it is a lot of it is to add character to the track. Because another thing that we run into in modern day producing nowadays is everybody's using the same drum samples all the time, right? Everybody's using the same synthesizers, sometimes even the same presets. So one way to help your music stand out is to start giving all these instruments their own little character. And this is a great plugin to do that. I love using Decapitator, especially because it also has this tone knob. So you can brighten up the sound if you need to, or you can darken it. And then it also has this high cut here, where you can almost filter the distortion out a little bit, so that if you, again, you don't want to build up too many high frequencies to where at the end it's just a whole bunch of high frequencies and distortion. We're always trying to get a little bit of a smoothing on the top end, so that way if somebody's cranking your stuff in their headphones, it's not making their ears bleed. So let me show y'all maybe one or two more plugins, and then I'm going to head on over to the Music Producer School community page. Make sure you go ahead and join that. I'll approve everybody that joins before I go in there. And once again, have a track that you'd like for me to listen to over there, and be able to submit it on a YouTube link or a SoundCloud link. And I'm going to try and see what I can do to help y'all out with your tracks. So that was the Decapitator, which I really like. I showed you Driver. Somebody had asked me about mastering before, and I like to use, oh, you know what? I've got to show y'all this plugin right here. This plugin is super cool. Omicide. Omicide looks kind of intimidating when you look at it, but if you understand that it's basically just a 4-band almost EQ in a sense, meaning you can split up the frequencies that you want to use with it here. So this would be like my lows, this would be my mid, this would be my high, or my mid high, and this would be my high. Now you're not seeing that reflected up here, and let me show you how this works. We got band 1, and these are the frequencies that you use them with. So right now it's just functioning as a 2-band, kind of like a low and a high thing, which honestly, in the beginning stages of your production career, it's probably a little bit easier and safer to only focus on 2 bands. So you'd maybe want to say, okay, I want to just work with this one knob over here on my bass frequencies, so you can pick the amount of distortion and the level of your bass, so you can actually adjust the level of your bass frequencies in a sound to your higher frequencies. So check this out. So I just removed the bass frequencies. Watch when I bring this all the way over here. See how it's almost acting like an EQ? And now I'm bringing, so this button, or this knob that I'm using right here is called the crossover. So right now I'm filtering out everything under 5K. So let's say that I wanted to only work some distortion, like I said, on my lower part of the sound. I don't really want any distortion. So I'm going to bring this up to around, let's say here. I'm going to take the mix knob down to where I have no distortion, and this is just on my snare I'm working on again. Now obviously on this one, I have a whole bunch of distortion going on. So I'm going to bring my distortion and my gain back a little bit. I'm going to bring this shape down. See, and again, this one has a feedback control to where I can get a little feedback, and this is, again, more kind of a sound design thing. But for any of you people out there that are working on film scores, movie type stuff, TV commercials, and you need to design some interesting sounds, these distortion plugins are also a great way to do that. So you can hear, again, this is my regular sound, and then with Omicide. So it's a pretty cool plugin. It has a nice mix wet dry control over here as well. So like I said, I would probably get it a little more distorted than I would like, and then bring it back dry, and then slowly mix in the wet distorted signal with it. But this one is actually called a multi-band distortion because right here in the plugin, like I just showed you, you can decide where you want that crossover frequency to be. So you don't have to separate and copy the sound like I showed you before. You can actually just use that one snare on one channel, and with this plugin, you can actually just separate the lows from the mids or the highs. And like I said, this one, you can actually get 4 different bands going. So with all this stuff right here, you see I have 4 different bands of control right here, and that's just for this one sound. So Omicide is definitely, I would say also because it has a bunch of different modes that you can use, I would say also that Omicide is probably one of my favorite plugins just because it has so many different types of distortion built into it that you can basically get almost probably any distortion type sound that you would need. So, you guys, I'm going to actually end it there because I think y'all get the idea. Like I said, we're going to go way in more depth of this, but hey, Rory, not sure what the deal is there, dude. My power went out a few minutes ago, so I had to restart the stream, and I'm not sure if that possibly has some type of issue that is going on with it. I'm not really sure, but yeah, the power went out over here a few minutes ago. So this is actually part 2 of today's stream. I'll investigate into that, but thanks for the heads up. So you guys, I'm going to go head over to the Music Producer School community page. I know I've already got a couple tracks on there that people posted that they wanted me to listen. So y'all give me maybe about 5 minutes or so, and I'm going to be up back over there in the community page. And if you want to post a track that you want me to listen to, go ahead, meet me over there. I'll get the live stream fired up in just a minute, and we'll go check out some of your tracks. So I appreciate y'all sticking with me today. Sorry about the power outage, and I'll see y'all over in Music Producer Community in just a minute. Peace out.